The house was still. Not peaceful, just still. Like the air had agreed not to breathe until she walked through that door. Her glass of wine from 3 nights ago still sat untouched on the windowsill. Lipstick ring dried. Dust starting to settle. Her sandals were by the door, exactly where she'd kicked them off before flying out. And me? I was sitting on the staircase, gripping her engagement ring so tightly it left a dent in my palm. I had already packed her bags. I had already changed the locks. And I had already made up my mind. This wasn't a story about a misunderstanding. There was no dramatic twist. Just 1,000 tiny cracks I ignored until they shattered all at once. She told me it would be just a girls' weekend. A harmless bachelorette trip to celebrate the end of freedom, she joked. Cute, right? Except I wasn't laughing, because while she was gone, the universe decided to stop pretending. It peeled off the plastic smile I thought was our life and showed me what really lived underneath. Started with a DM, not from some guy, but from her cousin. A cousin who barely spoke to me. You didn't hear this from me. That was the only warning I got. What followed was a screen recording of a group chat I wasn't supposed to see. The girls were laughing, typing in all caps, sending videos. Clips of hotel room games that weren't games. Snaps of Melanie in a hot tub with someone who was very much not me. Captions like, "She's gonna need ice after this. Bride-to-be? Nah, just being." It was like watching a parody of my own life, except I was the punchline. I didn't sleep that night. I just stared at her side of the bed, the makeup-stained pillow she always hogged, the drawer where she kept her vows, half-written, half-lies. When her Uber finally pulled up outside the next evening, I didn't rush to the door. I watched from the window. She looked tired, hungover, happy. She was texting someone and smiling. Not the smile she gave me when we were alone. This one had teeth. Intent. She didn't even notice the missing welcome mat. And when she opened the door, she froze, because right there in the middle of the living room sat her luggage. Neatly zipped, shoes tucked on top, and a note that simply read, "No need to unpack. You're already done here. To be continued in part 2. She stood in the doorway like she was frozen in time, her eyes flicking from the packed luggage to the empty hallway behind me. For a moment, she didn't say a word. Her mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. Maybe she expected a hug. Maybe she thought I'd ask how her flight was. Instead, I stayed exactly where I was, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, staring at someone I no longer recognized. "I can explain," she finally said, stepping in slowly like she still had the right to be here. I didn't move. I didn't blink. She tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled away, and that's when her expression shifted. From surprise to annoyance. She had the audacity to look annoyed. "Are you seriously going to believe some video over me?" she snapped. "Do you know how many apps can fake that stuff?" That's when I knew. Right there. Not from the video. Not from the messages or the blurry footage of her sitting on someone else's lap in a club suite. No. I knew from the way she didn't even ask what I saw. She just tried to lie faster than I could hurt. I walked over to the table and picked up my phone, already queued up to play a voicemail. "You might want to listen to this before you keep digging," I said. The voice that played through the speaker was male. Drunk. Loud. Slurring. "Yo, Melanie. Tell your fiancé he's a lucky dude. Or maybe I'm the lucky one." Huh? Laughter. Background cheers. And then her voice. Unmistakable. Laughing back. Slurring something about it. Not counting if it's before the wedding. She went pale. "Who sent that?" she asked, voice smaller now. I didn't answer. I just stared. She repeated it louder this time, angrier. "Who sent you that?" I looked at her and asked the only question that mattered. "Was it true?" She opened her mouth again. Probably had a dozen excuses lined up, but all she managed to whisper was, "I was drunk." Drunk. That was her defense. Drunk. I turned away. I walked to the door, held it open, and didn't say another word. She stood still for another 10 seconds before grabbing the handle of her suitcase with shaking hands. As she passed me, she said, "You're throwing this all away over one mistake?" I didn't answer, because she wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She wasn't even sorry. She was just inconvenienced. She walked out, and I closed the door before she even reached the porch steps. Then, for the first time in our entire relationship, I locked it. And this time, it wasn't for security. It was for closure. The silence after she left was heavier than anything I'd ever felt. You know how people say a house can feel empty? Ours didn't feel empty, it felt haunted. Her perfume still lingered in the hallway. Her hairbrush sat in the bathroom like it was waiting for her. But everything that made it our place was already gone. I turned off the lanterns outside one by one. Each one felt like extinguishing another lie I had believed. I didn't sleep that night. I kept staring at the front door, half expecting her to come back, apologize, cry, something. But she didn't. Instead, I got a string of messages. First, a long text about how I was being irrational and emotional, as if I was the one who had betrayed her. Then, a follow-up saying I should have been a man and talked to her calmly instead of kicking her out. That part almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was exactly what she always did. Flip the blame like a switch. I didn't respond, but someone else did. Her friend Whitney, the one who was always the loudest at brunch, always the first to defend Melanie no matter what, messaged me out of nowhere. She just sent one sentence. "You didn't deserve that, Elliot." I stared at it for a long time. Then she sent another message. This one longer. She told me that Melanie had bragged about getting it out of her system during the Bachelorette trip. That it wasn't even just one guy, it was two. That she joked about how forgiveness is easier when there's a wedding deposit. Whitney said she hadn't known how bad it really was until the video surfaced. That she felt sick for not speaking up sooner. I thanked her, not because it made me feel better, but because it made everything clearer. This wasn't a slip-up. It wasn't alcohol. It wasn't peer pressure. It was planned. It was something she believed she could get away with because she thought I'd forgive her like I always did. Because I was soft. Because I was the kind of man who lit paper lanterns and played love songs on a piano at night while she whispered other people's names. The next day, I called the wedding planner and canceled everything. I didn't just postpone it. I erased it. I called the caterer, the DJ, the venue. Each phone call felt like breaking up with a future that no longer existed. Some of them tried to comfort me. One of them even said, "You're making the right call." The hardest part? Calling my mom. She adored Melanie. Thought we were soulmates. She kept asking, "What happened?" And I didn't have the heart to say it out loud. I just told her the wedding was off and that I needed space. She started crying, and I had to mute myself because I was already doing the same. I didn't tell anyone at work. I didn't even show up. I stayed home, walking from room to room, noticing how everything, the throw pillows she chose, the photos she framed, the books she never read, felt like part of some fake museum now. By the time the sun went down again, I realized something. She didn't call. She didn't try to come back. She didn't even pretend to be sorry. But someone else did. Not her. Someone I never expected. It was around midnight when the knock came. Not a text. Not a call. A real, physical knock at the door like it was 1997. I froze. For a second, I thought maybe Melanie had finally decided to come crawling back. Maybe to explain, maybe to fight, maybe just to twist the knife one more time. But when I looked through the peephole, it wasn't her. It was Sam. Sam, her brother. We were never best friends or anything, but we had some history. We watched football together a few times. Drank beers in the garage during family barbecues. He always seemed decent, way more grounded than Melanie, always with this quiet way of seeing more than he let on. That night, though, he looked uncomfortable. Hands shoved in his hoodie pocket, hair a mess, dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept either. I opened the door, said nothing. He didn't wait for an invitation. He just walked in, glanced around the room like he was looking for something, or maybe checking if she was still here. Finally, he said, "I told her not to do it." I blinked. What? He sat down at the edge of the couch like it was lava, his fingers digging into his knees. I told her that if she went through with it, she'd lose everything. You. the wedding, respect. But she wouldn't listen. He looked up, and there was this sharp grief behind his eyes. You were too good to her, man. She got bored of being treated like gold. I stood there, stunned. I didn't even know how to respond. I just kept hearing the words. She wouldn't listen. Like it was all so predictable. Like this had been a slow-motion car crash and everyone saw it coming except me. Sam pulled something from his pocket. A folded sheet of paper. She wrote this on the flight home. I found it in her purse when she was crying in the bathroom. Thought you should see it. I hesitated, then took it. Unfolded it slowly. It wasn't an apology. Not really. It was a list. A list. At the top, in her handwriting, it said, "Things to say if he finds out." Beneath it were bullet points. I was drunk. It meant nothing. It was just dancing. My friends pressured me. "You're overreacting. Do you really want to cancel the whole wedding over a weekend?" Each one hit like a nail into the coffin of our relationship. It wasn't just the cheating, it was the preparation for the aftermath. She had rehearsed how to lie to me. She had anticipated being caught. And she planned for damage control, not regret. My hands trembled. Sam whispered, "I know she's my sister, but I can't defend that." I folded the paper, tighter and tighter, until it was just a crumpled ball in my fist. I couldn't even speak. Sam didn't wait for me to. He stood up, looked me in the eye, and added quietly, "If it means anything, I would have married someone like you if I were her." Then he left, and I stood in the living room, alone again, holding proof that love can rot, and that sometimes even family sees the truth before you do. The next morning, I woke up on the living room floor with my phone still clutched in my hand and that list, her list, crumpled beneath my back like a broken piece of armor. My body ached, but not nearly as much as my mind. I hadn't cried yet. I hadn't screamed or thrown anything. I just kept sinking deeper into the realization that everything I'd built with her was designed to collapse the moment I trusted it the most. I made coffee like a robot. Same mug, same spoon. I stirred it 5 times like always, only to pour it out after one sip. I didn't want comfort. I didn't deserve routine. I opened my laptop and started deleting wedding files, invitations, color schemes, playlists. That's when I found it. A folder on my desktop labeled Us Ring. I didn't remember naming it that. I hovered the cursor for a moment, then clicked. Inside were dozens of things. Photos, screen grabs of texts, Pinterest screenshots. But one file caught my attention. A music playlist titled Walking Down the Aisle. I pressed play. The first song was the one she said reminded her of us. It had played in her car the day we got engaged, and she cried halfway through it. I remember thinking it was the happiest cry I'd ever seen. But now, hearing it again, every word felt like it was mocking me. Her voice came into my memory, singing along with it, her hand on my knee, saying, "I want this playing when I walk toward you." I stopped the song. My throat tightened. The second track started automatically. It was upbeat, the one she picked for our first dance. I skipped it, then the next, a slower tune, then another, and then suddenly, something I didn't recognize. It was a song I'd never heard, with a name that made no sense. Just a string of emojis. I clicked it, and the lyrics were like a punch to the face. It wasn't a romantic song, not even close. It was explicit, wild. And in the background, deep in the second verse, was laughter. Her laughter. She had recorded something. Maybe from the trip. Maybe a joke. But it had been mixed into the audio somehow. Her voice mid-laugh, saying, "Oops, don't tell my future husband." I yanked my headphones off like they were burning my ears. I sat frozen for a full minute. Then I clicked Properties. The file had been added 2 nights ago, while she was still on the trip. Meaning she had made this playlist after everything she did. Meaning she planned to walk down the aisle to songs layered with her own betrayal. It wasn't just cheating anymore. It was a performance. Private joke I wasn't in on. She was gonna marry me while hiding that audio in the background like it was some twisted trophy. And I had no idea how deep it went. How much more there was to discover. But that night I decided to find out. so I called the hotel she stayed at. I didn't expect anyone at the hotel to remember her. It was a luxury place, flashy but forgettable, the kind of place where bachelorette parties blur together and cash tips make problems disappear. But something inside me couldn't rest. I needed to know if what I saw, what I heard, was only the tip of the betrayal or the full picture. So I dialed the number, rehearsing a story about lost property. Something innocent, something believable. The concierge answered on the third ring. His name was Brian. Polite, efficient, just distant enough to remind you you're one of 100 guests. I told him I was calling about a missing necklace, that my fiancée had stayed there over the weekend, and I gave her name. I braced for the usual response, "We'll check with housekeeping." But instead, there was a pause, a beat too long. Then he said, "Oh, yeah, I remember her. That wasn't what I expected. She was with that wild bridal party, right?" he added, chuckling nervously. "Room 718? I remember because security got involved." My heart thudded. Security? He hesitated, as if realizing he'd said too much. I probably shouldn't say. Guest privacy and all. I felt something sharp twist in my chest. "Please," I said. "I'm not trying to get anyone in trouble. I'm just trying to understand what happened. I was supposed to marry her. I didn't know that she was capable of. I don't even know what I didn't know." Something in my voice must have cracked, because Brian sighed. "Look, officially, I can't tell you anything. But off the record, it wasn't pretty. I didn't breathe. I didn't speak. I just listened." He said there were multiple complaints about noise from the room. Guests on both sides had reported disturbing sounds. The kind people don't mistake for karaoke or laughing. At one point, a neighboring guest actually filed a complaint, saying it sounded like more than 2 people. Security had to visit the room twice, once around midnight, once at nearly 4 in the morning. They kept the "do not disturb" sign up the whole time, he added. But one of the guards swore he saw 3 different guys come and go between 11 p.m. and sunrise. At least one of them wasn't part of the hotel staff or her party. I think I stopped blinking. "And the weirdest part?" Brian said, lowering his voice. "Someone left a note at the front desk when they checked out. Said, 'Thanks for the unforgettable send-off. Hope the groom's as clueless as he looks.'" I didn't even remember hanging up. I just know I stood there, phone in hand, staring at the wall, and the room felt like it was tilting. That last line repeated in my head like a cruel chant. Hope the groom's as clueless as he looks. It wasn't just cheating. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a joke. I was a joke. I dropped the phone, stumbled backward, and collapsed into the nearest chair. Every ounce of me was vibrating with rage, heartbreak, humiliation, and I still hadn't heard from her. No apology, no explanation, just radio silence while I kept uncovering the pieces of a life I was never really part of. But that was about to change, because I decided I wasn't going to wait for her to speak. I was going to speak first. The next morning I shaved. First time in days. Not because I cared how I looked. I just didn't want to see his face in the mirror anymore. The broken, wide-eyed, betrayed version of me who sat in silence while his world collapsed. That guy was done. I wasn't suddenly strong or healed, far from it, but I had something else now. Clarity, and maybe a little fury too. I went to the storage unit we'd rented for wedding supplies. We had boxes of decor, napkins with our initials, photo booth props we never even used. I dug out the microphone we'd rented for speeches. The one she insisted on testing 3 times because she said, "It has to sound perfect when I talk about us." I stared at it for a moment before loading it into the trunk. Then I drove to my parents' house. They still thought the wedding was happening. They still believed Melanie was just stressed from planning. I hadn't told them anything because I didn't want to see the pity in their eyes. But I needed to now, because what I was about to do would go public. I told them everything, in quiet, even words. No yelling, no dramatics, just the truth. My mom cried. My dad clenched his fists. And then, they stood behind me, fully, without questions. That's the only moment that almost broke me. Later that evening, I parked outside what should have been our wedding rehearsal dinner. It was still happening, same venue, same people, same reservation. Melanie's family didn't cancel. In fact, I heard they told the restaurant I might be running late, as if everything was normal. I carried the mic case with me as I walked inside. The hostess blinked when she saw me. "You must be Elliot. They said you'd show." She led me to the private room where a cluster of familiar faces sat. Bridesmaids, groomsmen, cousins, her parents, even her grandmother, who gave me a warm smile like nothing had happened. And there she was, Melanie, seated at the far end of the table in a cream dress like she was already playing bride. She looked up. Her expression froze. And for the first time since all of this started, I saw fear in her eyes. I didn't sit down. I didn't say hello. I walked to the front of the room, opened the mic case, and clicked it on. The room fell completely silent. "Hi everyone," I said, my voice calm but steady. "I know this isn't the speech you were expecting tonight. Honestly, it's not even one I wanted to give. But I figured since you're all here and you care about Melanie and me, or thought you did, you deserve to hear the truth." Melanie shifted in her seat. Her father reached for her arm, confused. "I was supposed to marry this woman in 2 weeks. I thought I was building a life with someone who respected me, loved me. But it turns out, while I was planning our future, she was planning her weekend." I saw a few people glance at each other. The bridesmaids suddenly looked extremely tense. "She cheated on her bachelorette trip," I continued. "Not just once, multiple times, with multiple people. There's footage, messages, and she knew exactly what she was doing. She even made a list of excuses in case I found out." Gasped. One of the guys stood up, trying to say something, but I kept going. I was going to keep this private. But then I realized she wasn't sorry. She didn't even try to apologize. She made it a joke, a game, and I've played the fool long enough. Melanie's mother was covering her mouth. Melanie herself was frozen in place, eyes darting like a cornered animal. Not one word came out of her. Nothing. "So no, I'm not marrying her. And if anyone here still thinks this was just a mistake, then you're welcome to take her side. But I'm done being humiliated in silence." I turned off the mic, placed it gently back in the case, and walked out. No shouting, no dramatic exit. Just a man choosing not to sit at the table where he was being served disrespect. I expected someone to follow me. No one did. I drove home in silence. No music, no podcast, no thoughts loud enough to distract me from the hollow ache I'd been carrying for days. But for the first time, it didn't feel like pain anymore. It felt like air returning to my lungs. Like I could finally breathe without waiting for the next lie to knock the wind out of me. When I got home, I did something small. Something stupidly simple. I changed the wallpaper on my phone. It had been a photo of Melanie and me at a vineyard, laughing in golden sunlight. I replaced it with a picture of the ocean, open, endless, honest. I stood in the kitchen, made a grilled cheese like I used to before everything got complicated, and watched the sun dip behind the buildings. And for the first time in weeks, I ate the whole thing. That night, I started unpacking myself. Not the boxes, not the physical stuff, the parts of me I'd buried to make space for her. The hobbies I gave up. The books I never finished. The guitar I hadn't touched in over a year. I played it until my fingers hurt. And you know what? Felt good. Felt like me. Melanie didn't try to contact me after the rehearsal dinner. No texts. No calls. Nothing. I heard through the grapevine she tried to spin a story about me overreacting and being dramatic. But no one was buying it. Not after what they heard with their own ears. Her family stopped defending her. Some of her friends even reached out to say they had no idea how far she'd fallen. But I didn't need their pity or their explanations. I didn't need closure from her. I had found it myself. 3 months later, I was hiking in Colorado when I met someone. No big spark, no dramatic moment. Just 2 people laughing over bad trail mix. Her name's Paige. She's quiet like me. Thoughtful. She listens. Really listens. And the best part? I never have to wonder what she's hiding because with her, it feels like there's nothing to hide. We're taking things slow. No rings. No rush. Just healing. Just learning to be real again. And you know what I've learned? Sometimes, losing someone you thought you couldn't live without is exactly what you need to find the version of yourself you forgot. The one who deserved more all along. So yeah, she came back from her bachelorette weekend ready to be a bride. But I wasn't her groom anymore. I was already gone. Thanks for watching Reddit Confessions. If you've ever experienced a moment that completely changed the course of your life, a DM, a voicemail, even a knock at the door, share it in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more true confessions every week.